Hey, it's Dr. Schiller, and I'm making this video for you if you or someone you love are dealing with fibromyalgia, chronic pain, arthritis, or some other chronic illness or pain syndrome that's debilitating, that's taking you out of life. Because what I want to share with you is a vision might be very different than what you've heard from your conventional doctors who may have told you, hey, there's nothing else we can do, just live with it. And my view is that that's nonsense. My experience is as a rehabilitation doctor who, for over 25 years, has been working with people who've hit the wall, who've had that injury or illness or chronic illness that's basically knocked them down and they're trying to get up. And the problem with conventional medicine is that it has too narrow of a view. And I want to unpack that a little bit. I want to unpack the vision and I want to share with you what I consider an opportunity for healing that everybody has. And I want to paint that for you so you can see it. So the first thing is, let's just kind of flesh out what the problem is, okay? And the problem, of course, is that there's pain. There may be fatigue. There may be mood disturbance. There may be like just physical exhaustion or not feeling well. There may be unexplained symptoms. And conventional medicine is great at some stuff, but not great at dealing with chronic problems. And so what happens is you get your drugs or your procedures or your surgery, and either they don't help at all, they cause things to get worse, or they help for a little while and then it all comes back. Or maybe you've been referred to physical therapy or other sort of therapeutic approaches, and maybe they helped a little bit, or maybe they made things worse, or maybe they were helpful, but your insurance cut you off after 12 treatments or whatever, and there you were like, I'm not okay yet. Or maybe you were on the way to getting okay, but then you stopped therapy and you kind of trickled back and kind of slid backwards and got worse again. And so the bottom line that holds it all together, and which I've seen in so many of my patients who come to me, is that it's sort of like life is spiraling away. And I used to be able to do all this stuff that I cared about, but now I can't do things as much anymore. I don't have the confidence that I used to. I'm suffering too much with pain or other symptoms. I don't know what to do. And it can feel like you're looking over a big wasteland where there's like no life ahead of you. And that can lead to despair and just depression and kind of a misery of like, who am I? What am I doing here? And I see that all the time. And I see folks in that situation kind of falling through the cracks in the healthcare system. And so maybe you have a vague idea that, you know what, there might be things that I can do to heal. Maybe you're starting to kind of lose confidence in your conventional doctors, but you might also be wary of all like the, quick fixes and magic snake oil stuff that's out there, because there's a lot of it and it's a problematic situation. Okay, and so that's the rough stuff, that's the hard stuff. But just also let's acknowledge the aspiration. Let's acknowledge what we all want, right? We all want to be able to live in relative comfort. We want to be able to do things that we care about. We want to be able to connect with the people we care about. We want to be engaged in life. And if you've been dealing with a chronic syndrome that's been taking that away from you, it's super important to figure out how to reconnect back to that vision and reconnect back to that sense of possibility. And what I want to tell you is that it's there. The potential is there. And it can seem a bit like you're trying to cross some kind of chasm, like you're standing at one edge and there's a big drop off in front of you, and you don't know what's there, and you don't know how you're going to get to the other side, and it can seem overwhelming and it can seem scary. And what I've been doing for 25 years with literally tens of thousands of patients is being a guide. And in addition to getting academic training at MIT and Duke and Harvard and learning all the science and the underlying medicine and physical medicine and rehabilitation medicine, I've been studying in a academic and practical experiential way natural healing approaches that are really about activating the healing intelligence that's inside of you, that's been helping you heal since the day you were born, and actually since we were being formed before you were born. But what I've come to deeply believe from my experience working with so many people, combining and integrating conventional and natural healing, is that there really is a deep intelligence, right? And that you really, one of the most important things is realizing like conventional medicine is about a disease approach. What's wrong with me? What's broken? How am I sick? It's important to identify those things and make use of whatever technological approaches we can do to address those things. But there's a whole other thing that we're not doing in conventional medicine, which is saying, how am I whole? How am I healed? What are my inner resources? What can I do to mobilize that intelligence that conventional medicine doesn't understand? Because the fact is, you and your mind-body connection, all of your biology and biochemistry and physiology are so much more complex than like the most complex thing any human being has ever designed. Like, we don't understand it. Conventional medicine hasn't measured it, but just because we haven't measured it and we can't count it, it doesn't mean it doesn't count. It does count. It's essential. It's vitally important. And that inner healing intelligence, what you can learn by contacting it, is kind of like the rope you grab onto. It's kind of what helps you go through the uncertainty and lets you actually make the shift and get your biology to shift and your physiology to shift and your outlook to shift. So I want to unpack this a little bit more for you so you can understand what I'm talking about. So the first thing I want to share is that there is a path, and it's a journey, and it's not a quick fix. A lot of the problematic things are out there that are like giving you something that says, just take this or do this and it's going to fix you. And it doesn't work that way. And maybe you've already learned that. And what you've learned is that, you know what, there's a healing journey and you need to go on it. And you need to wake up in the morning and do stuff and learn from it and grow and change it and go forward like that. And so that's the kind of path that I teach people. I tend to break it down into what I call the 3 M's, like this diagram here, right? And you'll see there's 3 interlocking circles, and they're each got named with an M, and there's mind-body relationships, there's metabolic or biochemical stuff, and there's your movement or structural system. And all 3 of those are interlocking systems that are interdependent and working with each other. So for instance, when you do physical exercise, when you do stuff with your movement system, with your bones, muscles, joints, and tissues, you actually mobilize biochemistry that can reduce inflammation, that can enhance your metabolism of energy, that can shift so many things about your actual biological, biochemical processes. It also creates biochemistry and changes that affect your brain and your mind, that can calm your mood, enhance your sleep, improve your sense of outlook, improve your confidence. Likewise, if you mobilize the intelligent biochemistry of eating the stuff that's good for you and not eating the stuff that's bad for you, of doing intelligent supplementation to actually shift your biochemistry towards a place where your body's removing toxins more effectively, where you're not generating inflammation, where you're giving yourself the appropriate nutrients and a whole other host of different sort of biochemical metabolic factors, that's going to affect the way your nerve, muscle, bones, and joints work. It's going to affect the degree of physical and muscular pain you have. It's going to affect your physiologic performance when you try to do stuff physically. And for sure, it feeds into your brain, your mood, your sleep, your stability. And then getting to the 3rd M, the mind-body piece, if you're in a place of alarm, danger, fight, flight, freeze all the time, and a lot of us are like this in modern society, and if you have chronic pain or chronic illness that drives the fight, flight, freeze response, and an unbalanced fight, flight, freeze response or danger response feeds into the disease process that creates chronic pain and chronic illness. So if you're in that state of biology and mind-body connection, you're going to be driving illness and you're going to be getting sicker. On the other hand, if you learn things to shift your mindset, shift your biology, and shift yourself into a place of rest and digest where your body's actually able to repair itself, you're going to have an impact on your ability to function from a movement point of view, your metabolism, your gastrointestinal health. You're going to positively influence your digestion and absorption and your immune function. So these 3 systems are profoundly connected with each other, and they're incredibly important. The piece that I really want to talk about in this particular video series is really the mind-body part and the movement part, because those are the pieces that you can do completely on your own. Metabolic biological healing, for sure there's a lot you can do on your own, and I encourage you to pursue those things wherever you can find them from reputable sources, people who actually have integrity, who know what they're talking about, so that you can go properly along that path. But what I'm really passionate and mobilized and motivated to teach and share based on my own experience from studying the science and doing the work in my own life is about mobilizing your movement system and mobilizing your mind-body system and the connection between those two. And so I work with a model that I share with people, which is what I call the 7 steps of inner healing. And those 7 steps have proven in my experience to be profound in bringing people along a path of healing so much of their physiology, and especially the aspects of the physiology and biology that are involved in that physiologic decline over time, like we talked about at the beginning. So let's unpack what are those 7 steps. So let's go through these 7 steps to healing, and I'm just going to talk about them superficially and talk about them in more detail in another video because I don't want this to go too long. But what you see is the first thing there is mindset. Mindset's your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, the meaning you make out of things. And it might be obvious to you how important that is and how much your mindset can either serve you or harm you. The important thing to know is that you can work through various techniques and tools for shifting your mindset to a way that serves your health and your well-being. And it serves your ability to engage in the other things that you can do to actually learn to heal and to cross that bridge and come from that place of suffering, disabled, debilitated, miserable to a place where you're actually feeling better and able to reconnect with life. Second number on that list is physiologic self-regulation. You may have learned that you've got a fight, flight, freeze response and a rest and digest response, a stress response, relaxation response. Your stress response is about helping you deal with perceived danger. Your relaxation response is about helping you repair, assimilate, heal, and live well and live long and healthy, hopefully. The challenge is that sometimes the stress response gets turned on, whether it's by trauma, illness, pain. Those things activate the stress response. And in turn, the stress response activates the physiology of pain and trauma. So there's a vicious cycle that goes on there. And we also live in a time where there's just so much stress and uncertainty, and it's hard in 2022 and beyond. So most of us are overactive in that stress response, and we call that autonomic imbalance, where we're imbalanced towards a stress response, and that creates a whole host of physiologic issues and problems. And there are tools and techniques for bringing back balance, for stimulating relaxation response, simple things you do with your breathing, with your mind, with your intention, with your attention. And these are evidenced by growing scientific study and research showing how it affects so many different aspects of physiology, pain, motivation, sleep, all sorts of other important stuff. Number 3, as you see, is mindfulness. And I don't really like mindfulness because the word gets thrown around too easily. The way I like to think about it is it's compassionate, non-judgmental presence. It's a way of being present to your life and to other people and to your own being that is transformative. And we could talk about it a lot, but the real meaning is when you start to experience it. When you start to learn to actually sit with yourself in your experience and stop judging it so much and observe it. Because what you find is you have an observer, and the observer becomes an ally. The observer is quiet and it's present and it's caring. In the Torah tradition, which is my tradition, it's connected with your higher soul. And your observer is like a wise guide. And your observer connects your physiology to a more productive, healthful place. And all I can say is you need to train it and teach it. And it's easy to do if you get into the right learning environment to build mindfulness. And the key thing I want to share is mindfulness is often touted as being about like, okay, so let me pay attention to the good things in life and let me not forget that there's good. And that's incredibly important because when we do that, we open our hearts and we open up our physiology to a more positive outlook, which is actually healing. But there's another even deeper transformative aspect, which is when we bring mindfulness, meaning compassionate, non-judgmental presence and awareness, to the hard stuff. Because when we meet the pain, when we meet the difficulty in life, when we meet the anxiety we hold in our body, or the anger or rage we hold in our body, and we hold it in compassionate, loving presence, it starts to soften. It starts to lose its hold on us. We start to have more free choice about how we want to deal with the hard stuff in life. We're less stuck and less held under its grip. And that has a huge impact on things like pain and our mood and your physiology and your stress relaxation response. Number 4 is your mindful movement. And that's a whole other dimension of mindfulness, which can be brought simply to walking, right? And you could do slow, mindful walking, which profoundly can affect the way your balance and your neuromuscular system works, and the way you have a sense of being rooted and grounded on the ground and not floating and lost in space. But the other aspect is when you get into more complex movements, and throughout human history, there's been various traditions that have arisen of mindful movement. In our modern culture, we have things like Pilates and Feldenkrais techniques and other things. And then modern culture is drawn from ancient cultures and brought in things like yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, which are all ways of bringing your awareness and your consciousness into your body as it moves. Why is that important? Well, if you've got chronic pain and it's hard to move and your muscles are stiff, or you've got fibromyalgia and you've got a low threshold, when you do too much you flare up and you get miserable, when you start to do mindful movement, what you're doing is being aware of your threshold, being aware of your limitations, and learning first to move within your meditations, your limitations, moving within your limitations with a relaxed, calm mind, which turns off some of those restrictive reflexes and guarding patterns, and you start to move and breathe in a way that actually opens up your tissues. At a deeper level of really bringing your consciousness into your tissues, you meet your fascia. You meet the connective tissue that can get restricted from things like inflammation or infection or injury or trauma or immobility or just lack of use because of trauma, fear, pain, whatever it is. And you start to unwind your tissues from the inside out. And that's profound, because you can actually drop into the deeper layers of tissue of your body and start to move those from the inside out. So mindful movement, incredibly powerful, transformative, calming, shifting that fight, flight, freeze response in an embodied way. The other piece I want to add to that is that a lot of us calm down in our mind, or we calm down in our emotion. Maybe you're a person of faith who's learned to give your mind over to your higher source, your higher power, which is a calming influence on your thoughts, on your outlook, on your beliefs. But we also know that we've got deeply rooted physiology of fear and danger that's actually in your body. And it's a core brainstem kind of thing. And you don't necessarily get there through meditation and prayer if what you're doing is connecting in and out. You get there by bringing your consciousness down and in, bringing that higher consciousness. And if you're a person of faith, the way to do mindful movement is to realize that I am serving my source, right? And you bring your consciousness that way into the body, and you start to move from the inside out that way. And it's profound. Next on there is visualization. And the power of visualization sits between your mind and your body. According to the Kabbalistic sources and the sages, there is an aspect of reality, which is a creative, dynamic world where emotions live, and that's where imagination lives. And the power of imagination can feed into the negativity that we may have internalized in our life, or maybe experiencing because of pain, illness, or other difficult circumstances. And through that, we are repeating and rehearsing and imagining negative outcomes, which doesn't serve your healing process. On the other hand, you can take your power of imagination and you can feed it with your higher consciousness and higher intelligence. You can feed it with your higher aspiration and positive goals, and that actually starts to have an influence on your physical body, your emotional body, on your function and your ability to get through life and thrive in life. I think that's part of the reason why visualization techniques are used in business, in sports, in all realms of human endeavor where it's been studied. Visualization is part of enhancing performance. And so bring it to your healing process. So the last two on here are related. There's accessing the power of heart and soul. And the last one is transforming trauma and emotional distress. And those are incredibly related to each other. I know a lot of people who do a lot of work around transforming emotional trauma and emotional stress through a cognitive approach. And there's a lot of benefit there. You can really get far from doing cognitive approach. But at some level, you got to mobilize the power of your heart and soul, because that's where the trauma gets in and gets stuck. And I want to give an example, a little story from one of the people who I work with a lot in some of my online courses, and lovely person who's a loving, deep, sweet, holy soul who's been traumatized and walks around with so much doubt and self-blame and self-hatred because of what's been done to her, and it's not her fault. And she's got chronic pain. And when we do meditations together and we do these practices that are about opening up the heart to others with love and with compassion and generating a heartful energy and felt sense of love, of gratitude, of connection, she comes back after those and goes, oh my gosh, my pain went away completely. And that's from mobilizing energy of love, mobilizing energy of compassion, mobilizing energy of caring and generosity. And that's not an intellectual thing. It's a felt sense thing, and it's something that everybody can do. You know, you hear people talk about keeping gratitude journal, and that's great. But this is a whole other level, because it's not just about writing it down. It's about generating the felt emotional sense of it. And your heart is not just a pump. Your heart is surrounded by neurological and endocrine tissue and an energy system that are all interacting with each other. And when you generate heart energy of love and compassion, it's transforming your body, it's transforming your mind. It's incredibly powerful. The next level is going to the power of your soul. And there are tools and techniques for activating what the Torah sages call your divine soul, that every human being has. We've got a divine soul, we've got a lower soul, an animal soul. And the point is, we need to take care of our animal like any person who's good at horsemanship or horsewomanship. You take care of your animal, you brush it, you clean it, you care for it. But you're the rider, and it's not riding you. And when you activate and mobilize the power of your divine soul, when you get to know that deep inner place of quiet and connection to your source, if you're open to that, what happens is you learn to live there. You learn to live from that place. And you learn to let that part of you mobilize the lower part of you, and not vice versa. So that the difficult things that are happening in life aren't controlling your thoughts. You bring your divine soul and its energy of healing to your heart. And along with mobilizing the energy of your heart and love and compassion and generosity, you transform the self-hatred, self-doubt, emotional trauma, and it's profound. And it's a deeper level of healing. So those are the 7 steps or levels of healing that mind, body, and movement system as an integrated path. And that's part of the bridge that I lead people over, is how to work through those steps. And they are quite profound. I want to give another case study. I just want to share an example of someone named Martha who worked with me, and she was in her late 40s, and she developed fibromyalgia and irritable bowel. And she'd been a really high energy output system, going for it person for most of her life, and started to get sick after she actually had a gastrointestinal illness and then a trauma, and then things started to unravel. And, initially we just worked with simple self-regulation, quieting the mind, quieting the body. And as she did that, she started to realize and notice all the negative talking she was doing and the judgment that she was doing towards herself. So we started to think about mindset and talk through, okay, how do you work with the judgmental voices? How do you work with the part of you believes that you're not worthy, that you can't improve, that you can't change? How do you work with the voice inside that catastrophizes? And every time you feel pain, thinks about the whole story about how you're never going to be able to do stuff again. You're never going to be able to like heal or get better. And oh my gosh, what's going to happen to you and your relationship to your... That's where she was at. So we had to work through those things and talk through various techniques to help her choose a different mindset and learn to stop those negative thoughts. She learned mindfulness meditation, which, like I talked about, is really about becoming present and letting those thoughts come and letting them go, and actually meeting the emotional place underneath those thoughts, which was a painful place. And she discovered some difficult underlying anxiety that she'd been dealing with for many years, and learned to mobilize her own heart to work with that anxiety. She also did some psychotherapy on the side to work with that anxiety and those underlying beliefs that she had about herself. So through all of that, she's quieting all of that activated, amplified, fight, flight, danger response, quieting her body. She got involved in doing gentle hatha yoga because that worked for her and her worldview. And she got into her body and stretching it and learning how to open up her tissues and her joints and learning how to deal with, what happens when a fibromyalgia flare starts to happen because something stressful, the weather changes, or because she gets a cold or something went on. So she developed a kind of resilience for learning how to be aware and involved in what's going on in her inner world, her thoughts, her emotions, her bodily experience. And she had developed these tools for working with all that stuff. And so she was off to the races, and she's down the road, and she's going down the road working with all of this stuff, and so much more capable and able to deal with the challenges that come up. I checked something called an FIQR, which is a measure of how fibromyalgia is impacting someone, and her scores got, I think, 65% better, which translated into she was functional again. She still had some pain. She had bad days. She had stuff she's still working on, but she was so much better just from transforming her inner experience, her mind-body experience, and her body-mind experience. Okay, so I think that's enough for one vid. This video is part of a series. What's going to happen in the next video is we're going to unpack more some of these different steps of healing. We're also going to talk in more detail about what's the underlying physiology and biology about why things get worse. Why does a person who starts with a bit of chronic pain or fibro or trauma or some sort of illness, why does things spin out of control? Because when you understand that, you can start to understand what you can do to actually heal it and deal with it, so you move towards well-being and you move towards healing. So this is part of a video series. If you're on the general mailing list, you'll get that. And if you're not on the general mailing list and you just got here from another link or someone sent it to you or from a social post, I encourage you to put your name in the box below, which will get you on the list so you get notified about when the next video comes out. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I encourage you to leave comments or questions below if you have them about what we talked about in this video. And I look forward to seeing you in the next vid. Thanks so much.